Mr. Norcross, New Jersey.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, appreciate it, and good to have you here, Dr. Hall. We certainly appreciate sharing your views. I just want to follow up with a comment you made in your opening statement and follow up to Mr. Van Hollen's. You talk about wage growth as a stagnation on the revenue side of the ledger, and that over the course of the last year of this recovery, it has been stagnant. And I agree with that. I think we all agree with that. But I'm looking for a little better of an explanation. We look at 73 through, I guess, 2013. Real wages increased by 9%, but productivity, the very thing that you said drives those wages, was up by 74%. Huge gap that has been discussed. How do you attribute the difference between what happened back then and now, and why that isn't changing based on your earlier comments that with the growing economy, the growing wages?
Right. You know, I know it's been noticed, and it's a concern that productivity growth has outstripped wage growth at times.
Well, massively.
Massively. One part of it is non-wage compensation, things like healthcare costs and other things. That's been a big part of that. And so, in fact, if you sort of take that into account, they get a little closer. But you're right, there has been a little bit of a...
just fractionally.
Yeah, but there has been a bit of a separation of that, and I think that's an interesting thing. I still think, though, it's fair to say, though, that you still can't get solid wage growth without productivity growth.
Would agree.
And I think a lack of productivity growth is going to still hold back wages going forward, and if that isn't somehow resolved.
But just following that up, following your logic, then
Right.
we should have had a massive wage increase. 74% productivity growth and only 9%. I'm looking for how did that occur? And in your opinion, following your suggestion that the increase in productivity would give you wages, and that didn't happen.
Well, I don't, you know, I would have to spend a little time looking at it. I just right offhand, but I do, like I say, if you look at just narrow wages, that's a bit of it. We really have had a bit more of a separation between productivity growth and total compensation growth.
And the total compensation, I think it takes it up to maybe 17%, so it's 74, right. So it's still a massive difference. And I guess where I'm leading into is the trade agreements and 73 and NAFTA. And we're looking at scoring and whether or not a trade agreement is good for this country. You take certain assumptions into effect, wouldn't you? Other words, are they applying and following the rules that have been set up? So when you score something, do you assume that the other countries are going to follow the rules?
Well, that's right. And up to now, the scoring of trade agreements has been looking at tariff revenue. Lost tariff revenue has been driving that. The effects would be different if we did a dynamic analysis of a trade agreement. But you're absolutely right. It does rely on the agreement being upheld on both sides.
So when we're moving forward, any trade agreements we might enter into, you would assume that they're going to follow the rules as part of that scoring?
We do our best to estimate that. I mean, if there are indications that enforcement may be a problem, or some of those things may not be credibly enforced, then that could play into our scoring.
Is that a maybe? I'm not trying to pin you.
Yeah, no, I'm saying it's a judgment I can't make because I don't know all the details of a future trade agreement.
Follow? We're going to be running out of time. Would you please follow up with me?
Sure.
Find out. It's not a maybe. Are you going to have to assume they're following the rules? Because I look at Vietnam, who has never followed the rules on their wage agreements, yet they're going to be included in this trade agreement. Australia, different story. They tend to follow the rules. And when you start scoring these things, we just want to make sure that we're taking into account whether or not you're going to assume that they found God and are going to follow all the rules,
Sure.
which we find very unlikely. So Again, we appreciate you coming on board, looking forward to future meetings with you and your insight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gentleman's time.